every game matters in the title race. And this one has a little added extra spice because Arsenal are playing Newcastle. If you remember earlier in the season, it was all a bit aggy, wasn't it? This time it's at the Emirates. Of course, the last time it was at St James's Park. And Arsenal come off the back of really disappointing result in midweek against Porto. But prior to that, 21 goals in 5 games. They were flying. What happened in the game against Porto, Dan?
Europe is a completely different ball game. And I think what you have to realise, there was a stat about Pepe. I think he had over 45 knockout games that he had played in the Champions League. And Arsenal's overall combined team had 16. And I think it's about experience when it comes to European football, especially in the Champions League. And I think it's a completely different ball game. So all the Gooners that were saying they're going to get hit for 6, they're going to score all of these. The Portuguese and experienced European clubs know how to sit back, and you can keep the ball, you can have all the possession that you want, but it's what you do in the final third and if you take your chances. And the worst thing was, Arsenal didn't even really create many chances. So it's not like they had loads and it was great goalkeeping or they missed. They didn't create them. However, the Premier League, Saturday, will be a different story.
Yeah, you're feeling confident about this one. That's interesting because Newcastle in a funny place overall. Weird season for them.
Yeah, really weird.
With Arsenal, those goals that have been scored, Liverpool game, fantastic, tight game, did well. All the goals that have come in the recent games against teams that are sort of have been struggling somewhat, Palace and West Ham, it certainly doesn't feel good at either of those clubs. So to sort of not be able to create a shot on target against Porto, do you really try and, like Dan's saying, do you just box it off as Europe's different and sort of go again, or do you need to take something on board there? Because Newcastle are going to be a sterner test than you would imagine than West Ham and Crystal Palace have been in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's two ways to look at it. I think that any game where Arsenal come away having not had a shot on target, Arteta's going to be worried about. That's not a normal thing for them, especially with the attacking talent they've got in that side, from Odegaard to Saka to Martinelli. These guys that have been doing it week in, week out now for the last year and a half and doing it really, really impressively as well. There might be question marks over what happened with kind of the formation they were playing, when Trossard was involved. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's also involved in the weekend's fixture as well. But it does feel like at the moment, at least with the Premier League, like you lock off that result as purely a Europe one, and their results at the moment are quite frightening. They do like they're going for a really good period at the moment. Their corners at the moment are incredible. It's actually quite surprising they didn't manage to put one of those on target against Porto, because Porto did seem like they were struggling in defending them. But Arsenal know that they've got a little bit of beef here as well to settle with Newcastle. I think a lot of those players came away from that Newcastle game from St James's Park not happy with what happened.
The manager certainly
Arteta, exactly. I think they'll use that. I think that's something they've... Last year, I thought Arsenal maybe got a little bit too emotionally involved. We saw, even this season, we've seen people talking about the celebrations, all this kind of stuff. But I feel like this year we've seen them kind of take it to another degree, a little bit more maturity about how they're playing, a little bit more experience, because they suffered what they did last year of losing it to Man City in the final few weeks, in the final month. And so I think they know that these games, which can be a little bit more of a slip up, like they've dealt with the West Hams, as you mentioned, they've dealt with the Crystal Palaces. Newcastle is a game which you can slip up on. Okay, this might be a Newcastle side that has injuries in them, but it's still a Newcastle side that is well coached by Eddie Howe, that can be defensively strong, hasn't been amazing over the last couple of months. But this is still a side that will want to perform well, and they'll want to get another one up on you guys as well. So it can be a bit of like a banana peel.
Yeah, it's got an enjoyable like new little rivalry that's
it
turned
really
up here.
is, yeah.
Even a couple of years back, it was the game away from home at Newcastle. They lost 2-0, didn't they? And it was the one where the official bottling occurred for Arsenal in that first year. Newcastle had an amazing season last season. This season, the defence is in an odd place. In the last 5 Premier League matches, they've conceded 12 goals. That's 2.4 goals conceded on average over the last 5 matches. And 2 players in particular that I think is going to be a key matchup here is in the wide areas defensively or offensively for Arsenal. Trippier and Dan Burn have been 2 players that have been utterly loved at Newcastle over the last 18 months. But is that an area where you think Arsenal will sort of look to exploit them? In the recent game against Bournemouth, that both those players playing quite high up, does that leave that space in behind? And do you think that's an area that Arsenal are going to be sort of going for in terms of trying to put these guys to bed?
Tactically, that is what Arteta is going to be looking to try and do. get in behind the fullbacks, exploit the space in behind, and then whether it's them attacking direct or cutting back. But when you are playing with wing backs or your fullbacks that are bombing on, the moment you lose possession, unless you're Kyle Walker or someone that can get back very quickly, the recovery time, Arsenal have the players, whether it's Martinelli, Saka, that will exploit that space behind. And whether Arsenal take their chances, that's where it's going to count.
In terms of exploiting Arsenal down the other end, bit of criticism for David Raya for the goal against Porto. I'll be honest, and I don't know if it's kind of been sort of like chucked into my brain time and time and again and been one of the big stories of the year. I watched it and I literally, a little gremlin in the back of my head just went, I think Ramsdale saves that. Did anyone else think that?
Any mistake that he makes, Ramsdale would have saved that.
But is there any... Is that even worth talking about? But I guess in terms of exploiting them, you've got someone like David Raya who likes to come off his line.
Yeah.
Is that something that Newcastle's going to exploit in any way?
We'll put it this way, it's an issue that Arteta's brought on himself. The whole debate about how they need to fight for the number one shirt, so on and so forth. If you make a mistake, then the other one will get the shirt. Ramsdale made the mistake, and ever since Raya's been in goal. I think Raya is a fantastic goalkeeper. Like, he is aggressive. And for what people he might concede in those types of goals, which... I don't know. I think it's hard to say that goal is Raya's fault. Like, a defender should be going out and closing the man. He should have never had that much time on the ball to have a shot in that minute. Like, maybe kind of heads were a little bit not paying attention to the game, just thinking, the ref's going to blow the whistle in a minute or two.
It did happen with Mudryk earlier in the season.
It did happen with Mudryk, but that is just because he's an aggressive claimer of crosses as well. And the issue is... You're never going to know, well, those crosses that Raya has caught, that some keeper like Ramsdale would they have led to goals themselves if he wasn't so aggressive? There's never going to be a metric that can quite quantify something like that. But as I say, when the manager in Arteta has put so much pressure and so much media attention on the goalkeeper, any mistake you make is going to be crucified. You're going to get it in the media all the time. People are going to say, well, would Ramsdale save that? Would another goalkeeper, if they've spent 50 million, have they saved that, so on and so forth? I don't think, like, if I'm Newcastle or Eddie Howe, I don't think my thing right now is going, okay, I'm going to go and exploit David Raya. There's too many blocks ahead of that before getting to that kind of...
I disagree a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, because I think with... First of all, what have Newcastle got in terms of like great weapons there? You've got someone like Trippier, who is superb. There's a game against Crystal Palace earlier in the season at home. They might have won 4-1 or something like that. Trippier there was this real understanding, kind of one, flooding the box, and two, Trippier not really out wide, but kind of in line with the 18-yard box. Mm-hmm. And De Bruyne loves to do it as well.
Yeah.
It's that beautiful cross that the goalie can't really come for.
In no man's land.
In no man's land. And often it was actually a cross to the back stick as well. And I think there's something there to be exploited. If you've got Alexander Isak in the team, you've got Longstaff who can bomb in and get in there as well. You've got Anthony Gordon. I think there's something in that can be exploited, because I get what you're saying, but it's still a thing.
It is still a thing, but I think the thing is, when you have someone like Ben White, who's a centre-back playing right-back, you've got Saliba, you've got Gabriel. Maybe Kirill might be playing left-back, who's, it might be someone else, we never know. But those are three people that are fantastic in the air. I think right now, Arsenal have to worry about trying to dispossess Odegaard, to dispossess the wingers, and then go on to... Newcastle need to focus on that, and then focus on trying to go forward and go from there. Like, Trippier's ball into the box is fantastic, really is. And apart from that month in December, where he had a bit of a low point, he really has managed to turn it on again. I worry slightly for Dan Burn in this game. I think up against Saka is going to be a real tough time, and tough opponent to play against. I just think for me, this is going to be a real midfield battle. And look, Newcastle have a lot of injuries in that midfield, and it's going to be really, really tough, especially for someone like Lewis Miley, who's only 17 years old.
So let's talk predictions here. One final thing to say is, obviously Arsenal, both those games are the same lineup. It'll be interesting to see if they mix it up. And another running theme is the use of Saka and Martinelli so much, and there being so much pressure on them. Is that a thing that's going to play a part in this one? Dan, you seem confident at the start for Arsenal. What's the score going to be then?
Still confident with Arsenal. I'm going to go 3-1.
8 minutes on, still
I'm going to go 3-1 Arsenal.
3-1 Arsenal. Okay. I think this could be a bit awkward, but I think they might sneak it 2-1. Arsenal, I'm going to go with.
I think in the Premier League, Arsenal really are kind of just going through teams at the moment. I'll go with a 2-0.